Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going beyond the headlines. We're going to be exploring the relationship between India and the US.
Two global giants.
Yeah, two global giants. And we're using this recent briefing document. It was updated just last month. And it outlines, what they call a comprehensive global strategic partnership.
Itchy title.
Yeah, but it's not just diplomatic jargon. I mean, this partnership really has serious implications for the world. And for you, think about this. India supplies 40% of the generic drugs that are used right here in the U.S. That's just one, tiny little piece of a massive puzzle that we're going to unpack today.
And it really highlights how interconnected our world has become. And it's not just pharmaceuticals. Over 160 Indian companies have invested, I think it's staggering, $40 billion into the U.S. economy, creating over 425,000 jobs.
Wow.
But it's a two-way street.
Of course.
American investment is flowing into India as well.
So we're talking about a partnership with some serious economic clout, but what's the overall temperature of the relationship? Are we talking like a blossoming bromance? Is this a slow-burning rivalry or somewhere in between?
I'd say the document paints a largely positive picture, emphasizing collaboration and shared goals, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region. There are some hints at some underlying tensions, particularly regarding trade and market access, though.
Okay, so it's complicated.
It's a multifaceted relationship, for sure.
Multifaceted, I like that. So let's break this down because the document flows a lot of information at us, highlighting cooperation across all these different sectors.
Yeah.
So where do we even begin?
Well, right off the bat, the sheer frequency of high-level meetings between Prime Minister Modi and President Biden jumps out. We're talking multiple encounters in just the past couple of years, from G7 and G20 summits to a dedicated state visit.
Okay, so that's not just a casual how's the weather chat over coffee. This suggests a real sense of urgency, wouldn't you say? What's driving this need for constant communication at the highest level?
It points to the strategic importance that both countries place on the relationship. There's a shared recognition that navigating the complexities of the 21st century, from economic interdependence to security challenges, requires close coordination.
Right, because let's be honest, the world feels a bit like a wobbly tightrope walk these days. So where does defense cooperation fit into this high-wire act? The document mentions a major defense partnership, which sounds impressive, but what does that actually look like in practice?
Well, it translates into some serious hardware. We're talking over $20 billion worth of U.S. defense equipment purchased by India. Everything from transport aircraft like C-17s and C-130Js to helicopters like Apaches and Chinooks and even maritime patrol aircraft like the P-8I.
Okay, so that's a lot of firepower, but are we talking purely transactional here, or is there genuine military-to-military cooperation happening on the ground?
Oh, it goes way beyond just signing checks. India and the U.S. engage in a whole spectrum of joint exercises, each focusing on different aspects of military readiness. There's Yuddha Abhyas for the armies, Vajra Prahar for special forces, Malabar for the navies, and COPE India for the air forces.
What?
They even have a tri-service exercise called Tiger Triumph.
Okay, that's a mouthful. Out of all those joint exercises, which one stands out to you as the most impressive or strategically significant?
Malabar is particularly noteworthy. It's a massive naval exercise involving not just the U.S. and India, but also Japan and Australia.
Really?
It sends a clear message about their shared commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific.
Which I'm sure has some people in Beijing shifting nervously in their seats.
I would imagine.
Right. Because reading between the lines, there's definitely a China factor at play here. But before we get too deep into geopolitics, I want to come back to this idea of deepening cooperation. The document also mentions India-USX, this initiative to foster defense innovation ecosystems between the two nations. What's the big idea there?
India-USX represents a shift from simply buying and selling weapons to jointly developing cutting-edge technologies. It aims to connect startups, researchers, and established defense industries in both countries, fostering collaboration and potentially leading to breakthroughs in areas like artificial intelligence, drones, and cyber warfare.
So it's about future-proofing both countries' defense capabilities. And speaking of the future, let's talk about security in the digital age. What does the document say about cooperation on counterterrorism and cybersecurity?
It highlights active collaboration, including intelligence sharing and joint training exercises. They even had a dedicated Homeland Security dialogue in February 2024, where they tackled tough issues like border security, cyber threats, and of course combating terrorism.
It's interesting that the document specifically mentions India joining the U.S.-led counter-ransomware initiative. It seems like India is increasingly stepping up to play a global role in addressing these emerging threats.
Absolutely. And on the economic front, The U.S. has solidified its position as India's biggest trading partner. We're talking about a bilateral trade relationship exceeding a whopping $190 billion in 2023.
Okay, that's not chump change.
Yeah.
But is this a recent development, or has the U.S. always held the top spot in India's trade network?
It's a relatively recent surge. The trade relationship has exploded in the past decade or so, highlighting the growing economic interdependence between the two countries. But this massive trade volume also creates potential friction points.
Right, because when you're doing that much business together, disagreements are bound to pop up. But before we dive into the potential thorns in this rosy trade picture, let's talk about investment. We mentioned Indian companies pouring money into the U.S., but what about the reverse? Are American companies venturing into the Indian market?
Absolutely. The U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, or DFC, has invested over $4 billion in India, supporting projects in renewable energy, healthcare, and infrastructure.
Okay, so it's not just about chasing profits. There's also an element of supporting development in India. But let's be honest, in this day and age, no discussion of international relations is complete without addressing the elephant, or perhaps we should say the dragon in the room. How does China factor into the India-U.S. dynamic?
China's growing influence casts a long shadow over this partnership. Both India and the U.S. see China's assertiveness in the region, particularly in the South China Sea, as a potential threat to their interests. This shared concern is a major driver of their deepening strategic alignment.
So we're seeing a convergence of interest driven, at least in part, by a common rival. But before we get too lost in the geopolitical weeds, let's come back to the document itself. It highlights the Climate and Clean Energy Agenda 2030 partnership, launched back in 2021. On the surface, it sounds ambitious, but is there real substance behind the rhetoric? Are they actually making progress on this front?
It's not just empty promises. The partnership focuses on concrete actions in areas like renewable energy deployment, energy efficiency, and sustainable transportation. For instance, they've set up a joint task force on energy storage, a critical challenge for integrating renewable energy sources into the grid.
So they're grappling with the nuts and bolts of transitioning to a cleaner energy future. But let's not forget about space, the final frontier. What does the document tell us about collaboration beyond Earth's atmosphere?
Their collaboration in space is truly reaching for the stars. One standout project is the NISAR satellite, a joint effort between India's space agency ISRO and NASA. It's said to be the most advanced radar imaging satellite ever launched, with the potential to revolutionize our understanding of climate change, natural disasters, and even deforestation.
Wow, talk about a high-stakes partnership. From tackling climate change to securing global supply chains to quite literally exploring outer space together, it seems like India and the U.S. are weaving an increasingly intricate web of cooperation. But as we all know, even the closest relationships have their bumps in the road.
And that's where those trade tensions that we touched on earlier come into play. Despite the impressive trade figures, there's some behind-the-scenes grumbling, primarily stemming from these market access issues.
Okay, so what's the source of this friction? Is it just typical trade negotiation haggling, or is there something more serious brewing beneath the surface?
Well, the document mentions the Trade Policy Forum, or TPF, as the primary mechanism for ironing out these wrinkles. It's essentially a platform for both sides to air their grievances and hopefully find some common ground.
So like a couples therapy session for trade negotiators?
You could say that the U.S. has voiced concerns about certain tariffs and non-tariff barriers that they see as unfairly hindering American companies' access to the Indian market. And there are also some disagreements over intellectual property rights, data localization policies, and agricultural subsidies. It's a complex web of issues, and finding solutions requires some delicate diplomacy.
It sounds like even the best of friends, or in this case, strategic partners, have their squabbles. But is this just typical trade negotiation posturing, or could these disagreements escalate into something more serious?
It's definitely something to keep an eye on. While both sides have expressed a willingness to work through these issues, finding a compromise that satisfies both Indian and American interests won't be easy.
Okay, so the trade relationship, while robust, has its share of potential potholes. But let's shift gears back to the defense arena for a moment. We've talked about the hardware, the joint exercises, the deepening collaboration. But what's the real strategic significance of all this military bonding? Are we talking about a genuine shift in the balance of power in the Indo-Pacific?
That's the key question. Joint exercises like Malabar with the U.S., India, Japan, and Australia, all sailing in formation, send a powerful message about their shared commitment to regional security. It's a subtle but significant signal, particularly for China, that these countries are willing and able to cooperate to safeguard their interests.
So a little bit of flexing their collective muscles, so to speak.
You could put it that way. It's about projecting power and deterring potential aggression. But it's also about building trust and interoperability between these militaries, ensuring they can operate seamlessly together if the need arises.
Right. Because in a real crisis, you can't exactly hit pause to figure out how to communicate or coordinate effectively. And that's where initiatives like INDUX come in, pushing this collaboration beyond just joint exercises into the realm of joint research and development. What's the long-term goal of this kind of deep technological integration?
It's about fostering a level of interoperability that goes beyond simply knowing how to fight alongside each other. It's about co-developing cutting-edge technologies, sharing expertise, and creating a more integrated defense industrial base. This ultimately strengthens both countries' defense postures and reduces their reliance on traditional defense suppliers.
So it's a win-win for both sides, strengthening their individual capabilities while also deepening their interdependence. But let's not forget about the technological elephant in the room, China. How does Beijing view this deepening India-U.S. partnership, especially in the realm of cutting-edge defense technology?
China is undoubtedly watching these developments closely and with a degree of concern. The rapid growth of India's defense capabilities, coupled with its increasingly close ties to the U.S., complicates China's strategic calculations. This could lead to an intensification of the regional arms race and heightened tensions in the Indo-Pacific.
It sounds like we're entering a new era of great power competition with technology playing a central role. But beyond the hardware and the geopolitical maneuvering, the document also stresses the importance of people-to-people ties. There's mention of the massive Indian diaspora in the U.S., numbering around 4.4 million. How does this vibrant community factor into the overall relationship?
It's a crucial, often overlooked aspect of this partnership. The Indian diaspora acts as a living bridge between the two countries, contributing to both economies, fostering cultural exchange, and advocating for closer ties.
So it's not just about governments and treaties, it's about shared histories, family connections, and a deep sense of community that transcends borders. And speaking of transcending borders, the document also dives into the realm of science, technology, and space, highlighting some pretty impressive collaborative projects.
One area that's really captured my attention is the Initiative for Critical and Emerging Technology, or ICE for short. It was launched last year by the national security advisors of both countries and represents a bold step towards deepening technological collaboration in areas with profound strategic implications.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What exactly is ICE all about? We hear a lot of buzzwords these days, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, biotechnology, but what are the specific areas of focus and why are they so critical and emerging?
ICE focuses on a range of technologies that are poised to reshape the global landscape. We're talking about artificial intelligence, quantum computing semiconductors, advanced telecommunications, and even space and defense technologies. These are areas where breakthroughs could have profound implications for economic competitiveness, national security, and even the future of warfare.
So it's not just about building faster computers or fancier gadgets, it's about shaping the future of, well, everything. But why launch this initiative now? What's the urgency?
There's a growing recognition in both Washington and New Delhi that these technologies are evolving at an unprecedented pace and the stakes are incredibly high. Falling behind in these areas could have serious consequences for both countries' economic prosperity and geopolitical standing.
So it's a race to the top, with both countries realizing they have a better shot at winning together than going it alone. But what are the potential risks of this kind of deep technological entanglement?
Well, there are always risks associated with sharing sensitive technologies, especially in areas with potential military applications. Striking the right balance between collaboration and safeguarding national interests is a delicate dance.
Right, because you don't want to hand over the keys to the technological kingdom, so to speak. But it seems like both countries are betting that the benefits of working together outweigh the risks.
Exactly. And there's another dimension to IC that's worth highlighting. It's not just about the technologies themselves, it's also about the people who develop and deploy them.
So investing in the human capital alongside the technological advancements, what does that look like in practice?
IC includes provisions for promoting STEM education and workforce development in both countries. It's about cultivating a new generation of scientists, engineers, and entrepreneurs who can drive innovation and maintain a competitive edge in the global technology race.
It sounds like they're taking a long-term view, recognizing that technological leadership isn't just about patents and prototypes, it's about building a sustainable ecosystem of talent and innovation. But let's zoom back in on some of those specific technologies that ICE is targeting. Out of that laundry list of cutting-edge fields, are there any that stand out to you as particularly noteworthy or potentially game-changing?
What I find particularly fascinating is the focus on dual-use technologies. those that have applications in both civilian and military domains. Take artificial intelligence, for instance. It can be used to develop self-driving cars or personalize your shopping experience, but it can also be used to enhance military decision-making, target enemy systems with greater precision, or even develop autonomous weapons systems.
So the line between civilian and military technology is becoming increasingly blurred.
Precisely. And that has profound implications for how we think about technology cooperation, export controls, and the ethical considerations surrounding these powerful new tools. ICE is, in a way, trying to get ahead of these challenges by establishing a framework for responsible collaboration in these sensitive areas.
It sounds like they're recognizing that technology isn't inherently good or bad. It's all about how it's developed, controlled, and ultimately used. But let's not get too bogged down in the ethics of algorithms just yet. I want to come back to this idea of defense cooperation. We talked about India's significant defense procurements from the U.S., but what's the real significance of these purchases? Are they driven by specific security concerns? And how do they factor into the evolving security dynamics of the Indo-Pacific?
What's fascinating here is that India's defense acquisitions aren't just about bolstering its military capabilities. They're also about strategic signaling. The choice to purchase American platforms like P-8I maritime patrol aircraft or Apache attack helicopters sends a message about India's alignment with the U.S. in the Indo-Pacific.
So it's a way of saying we're on the same team without actually saying it.
Exactly. And it's a message that's received loud and clear by other players in the region, including China. These acquisitions, coupled with the increasing frequency of joint exercises, contribute to a more complex and nuanced security landscape in the Indo-Pacific.
It sounds like we're moving away from the Cold War era's rigid alliances towards something more fluid and multifaceted.
Absolutely. We're seeing a realignment of partnerships based on shared interests rather than ideological blocks. And in this evolving landscape, the India-U.S. partnership is emerging as a significant force.
This has been a truly deep dive. I mean, we've covered so much ground from, the scale and scope of this partnership to the blend of long-standing ties with new initiatives like ICAT. It's clear this relationship is a major force shaping global dynamics. But before we let our listener go, I want to leave them with a final thought. This document paints a largely positive picture, but are there any potential downsides or risks to this close relationship that we should be paying attention to?
That's an important question. While there are many benefits to closer India-U.S. ties, it's crucial to acknowledge potential pitfalls. One concern is that the partnership could become too focused on countering China, leading to a zero-sum mentality that undermines opportunities for cooperation in areas of mutual interest.
So a sort of tunnel vision where the focus on rivalry overshadows the bigger picture.
Exactly. Another risk is that the partnership could inadvertently fuel an arms race in the region, leading to greater instability and mistrust. It's essential for both India and the U.S. to pursue their strategic objectives in a way that doesn't escalate tensions or undermine regional stability.
So a call for responsible statecraft, recognizing that every action has consequences.
Precisely. The India-U.S. partnership has the potential to be a force for good in the world, but it's crucial to be mindful of the potential downsides and manage the relationship carefully.
That's a great point to end on. We've only scratched the surface of this complex and evolving relationship, but I hope this deep dive has provided our listener with a solid foundation for understanding the key dynamics at play. If you're interested in exploring this further, I encourage you to search for India-U.S. Relations, ICT, or Indo-Pacific Strategy. You'll find a wealth of information out there. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of India-U.S. relations. We'll be back next time with another deep dive into a different corner of the world. Until then, keep learning and keep exploring